Hey everyone, so this is a video on The Lord of the Flies by William Golding. In this video I'm going to give you some background on the book and also provide my interpretation of what I think Golding was trying to do in the book. So if you're writing a paper for high school, for example, or creating your own presentation, this video will at least give you an alternative perspective that you may wish to include. So before I get into The Lord of the Flies, I want to start with this sketch by Mc Escher. We'll come back to it at the end of the presentation, but I want you to take a few moments and just look at it and develop some ideas about what you think Escher might be trying to convey, because I think it's integral to what Golding was trying to say. Okay, so as you read Lord of the Flies, begin thinking about this question, which is the question I think Golding was trying to answer. Are people flawed because society is flawed, or is it the other way around? Is there something wrong with us, and if so, what is it? So a little bit of background about William Golding. He was born in England. He fought in World War II in the Navy. He actually was part of the Normandy beach landings. He drove one of the boats. In 1954 he wrote Lord of the Flies, and he continued to write books after that, but he never had the same kind of success afterwards that he had with Lord of the Flies. And he died in 1993, one of the most acclaimed writers in England. So let's talk context. Golding wrote Lord of the Flies in response to World War II. He saw World War II as the ultimate expression of man's inhumanity to man. And there's two sort of main elements of that, the first being the Holocaust and the second being the atom bomb. So you all know, I won't go into it much, the Holocaust, 6 million people were killed, and the world really struggled with what to do with this after the war. It had never happened, at least in the modern era, before, at least on this scale. And people were frankly at a loss to understand how humans could do this to each other. So of course this was perpetrated by the Nazis, but they weren't the only ones. Our side had a hand in this sort of activity also, and that was in the form of the atom bomb. So the atom bomb was basically developed to avoid an invasion of Japan. The Allies knew that they were probably going to have to invade the Japanese homeland. This was going to cost a tremendous amount of American lives as well as Japanese lives, so Harry Truman decided that they would develop the atom bomb and drop it, and it forced Japan to surrender. It saved a lot of American lives, but at the same time it killed approximately 200,000 Japanese people, most of whom were civilians. So it was this boundless cruelty that Golding sought to understand. He wanted to know how it was possible, after 6,000 years of civilization, for us to spend so much effort and energy on destruction. And what Golding concluded was that it had to be the result of some fundamental flaw. There was no amount of education or experience or wisdom that could solve this. It was a defect in the way human beings are made, or the way we're put together. And if that's the case, Lord of the Flies is a dark novel, because it suggests there is no hope for us. If Golding's right, that humans are fundamentally flawed, then there isn't any chance that we'll survive. Ultimately, we're bound to kill each other. So what Golding wanted to do was explore this idea, and he did it by creating an allegory of the human mind at war with itself. And he went about this a certain way. He created a setting of an uninhabited island, untainted by human influence. And this is important because there was no previous or no pre-existing factors on the island. When the boys showed up on the island, there was nothing they could point to say that they were influenced to behave in any particular way. The boys themselves are strikingly similar. They have the same language, the same race, the same educational background. They all come from a private school, presumably the same financial background, the same religion, although religion is never mentioned specifically in the book. We can all assume that they were Protestant or perhaps Catholic. The point is they were some sort of Christian religion, we can assume. And Golding went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the characters were all the same. They had no shared history. They brought to the island no baggage of any kind. They were what a psychologist would call tabula rasa, blank slates. And the point of all this was Golding didn't want the reader to be able to attribute any bad behavior or good behavior to anything the boys had experienced in their past. He wanted this to be truly a from-scratch society that they created, and he wanted to see what they would do. And anything that happened could not be attributed to any external factors. It could only be attributed to their innermost motivations. So speaking of innermost innovations, Freud comes up a lot in Lord of the Flies. And Freud thought that our psyche can be divided into three parts. You have the ego, the superego, and the id. The id is essentially your base self. It's the devil on your shoulder. It is the part of you that behaves on impulse. You've got the superego, which is essentially the angel on your shoulder. It's the part of your brain that analyzes consequence and is always trying to keep the id in check. And then finally you've got the ego, and this is really, in the case of Homer on the right, the id would be evil Homer, the superego would be angel Homer, and the ego would be Homer himself. It's the person sort of stuck in the middle, trying to mediate between these two influences. So, Freud vis-a-vis the characters. Golding believed that when you remove the traditional influences, mankind will regress to his more animalistic Freudian roots. And he explored this notion by dividing the human psyche into parts that are represented by the characters. So in the book you've got Piggy. He's physically weak, but he's intellectually strong. He represents the superego. That is logic, reason, and rationality. You've got Jack, physically strong, a hunter. He represents the id. Animalistic passions and instincts govern him. You have Ralph, the leader, a balancing influence between passion and reason. He represents the ego. And then you've got Simon, who it's difficult to know what to do with Simon, but he exists outside this psychological paradigm. He's the visionary, the mystic. He's a Christ figure. So, are people flawed because society is flawed, or is it the other way around? Is there something wrong with us? And if so, what is it? This is the question that Golding was trying to get at when he created this scenario of the book. And as you read it, it will be interesting to see what you think about this question. Let's end with this sketch here. Based on what I've told you about what Golding was trying to do, what he was trying to suggest, what he was trying to explore, Mc Escher was trying to convey something with this sketch. And I think I know what Escher was trying to say, but perhaps after you've read the book, you'll have some more insight into this sketch also.